In this video, we'll talk about those extra features in Google Classroom that you're going to want to know about. We'll talk about where you can always find your students' activities in your Drive, other things besides assignments you can post that will engage your students, and how you can save a huge amount of time by copying your Google Classroom and using it again next year. So let's get started. The first thing we'll talk about is where you can find all of your students' work in your Drive. The first thing I'm going to do is click on Classwork at the top of the screen. Then in the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to click on Class Drive Folder. It took me right to my Drive and it put me right inside of this Google Classroom folder. All of the folders listed are all of the assignments that I posted for my students. So if I was to click on Classmate Kindness in the center of the screen, I'd be able to see all of my students' responses right from my Drive. Now, you can also access this folder directly from your Drive. You do not have to go through Google Classroom. So if I click on My Drive at the top of the screen, you're going to see that here is that Classroom folder. A folder is automatically created by Google Classroom, and it automatically adds all of your students' work to that folder. I'm going to go back to my Google Classroom at the top. The next thing I want to show you is how to create other activities for your students besides just assignments. So if I click on the Create button at the top of my screen and I go down and click Material, you'll notice that in this box there is no opportunity to put a due date or a score. Material is something that you just want your students to be able to view. A lot of times I will create material around different websites that I want my students to access. If you look at the top of the screen, the material icon looks like this. So I'm going to exit this and show you what I've already created in my classroom. At the top of my screen, you can recognize that material icon. So I included a QR code reader. I included a link to a lot of different websites that we use. Here I have a link to our Flipgrid, to Epic, to coding. I like to include materials that I know students are going to use throughout the year and keep them at the top of the page. Now, besides materials, you can also create a question. So if I click on Create again, and then I go down and click Question, I can ask my students a question so that we can take a poll of everyone. We can also engage in a discussion with each other, and I can also use a question as an exit ticket. Let's say that in social studies, we're starting a new unit about being a good citizen. I'm going to ask my students what they know already about what it means to be a good citizen. At the bottom of this, I can give it a point value if I want. I can also click on this down arrow and leave it ungraded. Then I can give it a due date. I'm going to click on No Due Date and click on No Due Date again, and then I'm going to assign tomorrow to be the due date. I'll click on the date. If I want to select a topic, I can select a topic. Then at the bottom, you can choose what kind of answer you want your students to give. So right now it's set on short answer, but I could also choose multiple choice. And what I could do is list a few different options, and students would have to pick out which one shows being a good citizen. I'm going to click on multiple choice and keep it at short answer for this case. And then I have one more decision to make. Do I want students to be able to reply to each other? So do I want to create a discussion? If I do, I'm going to keep it selected. It's going to stay on. However, if you do not want students to be able to reply to each other, you'll just click the circle and turn it off. Over on the right-hand side, you can decide if you want to let your students edit their answer, so that means they can go back and change their answer, or if you just want it to be a one-time answer and they're not allowed to change it, you'll just keep it not selected. Now, when you're done, you can click Ask to ask right away, or you can click on this down arrow next to the word Ask and you can schedule this. So you can decide if you want this to appear tomorrow, you can change the date and have it appear tomorrow, and then click schedule. It's up to you. I'm going to click cancel, and then I'm going to click ask. This question will appear at the bottom of my first section right here, but it'll also appear on my stream. So if I click stream at the top of my screen, you can see that the question is posted here, and that's probably the easiest way for your students to access it. Now, another neat feature is that your Google Calendar is built into Google Classroom. If I click on classwork at the top of my screen, and I scroll to the top, I'm going to click on Google Calendar in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. You're going to see that on Friday, I have a question due. So anytime you add due dates to your assignments or to your questions, those due dates will appear on your calendar, and that'll help you stay organized. They'll also appear on your students' calendar. And if I click back on my classwork page, and I click on my stream, if I look on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that it tells me that I have this question due on Friday. And this will also show up on your students' classwork page so they know what they have coming up due. The next thing I'm going to show you is how you can get your Google Classroom ready for next year and archive this year's classroom. I'm going to click in the upper left-hand corner of my screen on these three lines, and then I'm going to go down and click on Classes. You can see on the right-hand side is my Google Classroom. If you want to copy your Google Classroom for next year, meaning that you're probably going to do a lot of the same activities, you can click in the upper right-hand corner of this box on these three dots and click Copy. They'll ask you for a name of your new class that will be copied. You can enter in your name and click Copy. It'll take just a little bit to copy, but on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that I have already created a copy of my classroom here. When I click on it, you can see that my screen is fresh, so students are not going to be bombarded with all those assignments that were listed. When I click on classwork at the top of the page, you can see that all of my activities are grayed out, meaning that they're all drafts. So if a student logs in right now, they're not going to see any of these posts. But if you want to make a post active, if you want to assign it, you can click on these three dots on the right-hand side of that assignment and click Edit. You'll change how you want your students to access it. I want to make a copy, and then I'm going to click Assign. I'll click Assign. Now you can see at the top of the screen that my communities activity has been activated because it's now darker. And you can see on the right-hand side the time that it was posted. So now if my students were to log in, they would see this activity. So you can probably see the benefits of doing this. You don't have to type in the assignment title. You don't have to attach the assignment again. All you have to do really is click Assign. So that's a great option. You, of course, will not have any people in your class yet. You're going to have to add your new students by giving them your class code to join. So that's a great option that you can use. I'm going to go back to my classes again. If you want to archive your last year's class, which I like to do because I don't want to get it confused with this year's class, because I'm probably going to get rid of this name copy of. And so this is going to say Miss Avercamp's class, and this last year's is going to say Miss Avercamp's class. So I like to archive my old classes so I just don't see them anymore. The other reason that it's a good idea to archive your old Google Classrooms is that you don't want your old students to be interacting somehow in that old Google Classroom without you monitoring it and knowing about it. Now, just because you're removing students from that Google Classroom, they are still going to have access to all of the work that they did in it. So, just like the teacher has a classroom folder in their Google Drive, so do students. So, anything that they created with me last year is going to be saved in their Google Drive. They just won't physically be able to go into this Google Classroom. So to archive the class, I'm going to click on the three buttons in the upper right-hand corner, and then I'm going to click Archive. It lets me know that my students and I won't be able to make changes, and then I'm going to click Archive. Now that classroom has disappeared and I'm left with just my current class. Now, if you need to go to that archived class, you can click in the upper left-hand corner on these three lines and then click on Archived Classes, and you can find your class in there. Well, that is all for this video. If you enjoyed this video, please rate us on TPT. And if you have any teacher friends that you think would be interested in this course, please let them know where they can go to find it.